Welcome, 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 Voice of Truth. Jim Moore, glad to be here with you. I want to look at something, the role of the church in politics. Now, man, I know that sounds like, separation church and state and all of that stuff. I want to look at it biblically, because I kind of grew up where, and probably a lot of us did, churches over here, politics is over here, maybe if we get a Christian leader, but, let's stay out of it. And we get, when you start talking politics with people, boy, there's a lot of passion involved. I wish there was that much passion in the church sometimes. But does the church have a role in politics? And I think one of the ways that we miss this is because we don't understand kingdom. We don't understand kingdom. Now, listen, I'm having to go back and really look at a whole lot of this stuff again, because when you get this idea, and we've talked about before, that the church, it's just, you're here, depending on what denomination you are, what your belief system is, do the right thing, get saved, whatever, go to heaven when you die. There's really no role, it's like, I know that, there's verses, come out from among her, be ye separate. I understand all that. Those are scriptures, and yes, but we got to look at these in the context. But if you really look at it, what you see is a clash of two kingdoms, of the kingdom of light. We've been translated out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of his dear son. You see the clash here of empires. And when we've come into the one, then we have a role here in this other one, not just keep our head down and run and scurry along and be good citizens. I mean, if you have never read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you should go read that book and find out what happened to Paul and John and Peter, Polycarp, all of these guys, Mark, Luke. And, I was thinking about this some, and anyway, how you like my new hat? Boy, cool hat, huh? I love these new hats. Anyway, when I go and I'm watching Christian TV, or they put on Facebook these things where they're going to have, I don't know, camp meetings or revivals, whatever they call them. And they're going to have Bishop so-and-so. They're going to have Apostle so-and-so. Have you ever heard these titles? Apostle so-and-so. Now listen, just biblically speaking, we can debate the apostle thing another time. But I will say that in the scriptures, all the ones who made it to the rank, and I'm going to call it a rank here. I think that's okay because Paul uses that kind of terminology in 1 Corinthians, uses that, as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive, every man according to his own order. That word order is rank. Military guy, understand rank. I believe that's evident in there. Not that salvation is by works, but salvation is by grace. But there is, there is that, okay? Not to get to the point where they bully. Jesus used that example. In the scriptures, he said, look at this kingdom, how they operate, how the Gentiles, how the Romans do it. You go up the ladder, you have servants under you. But in this kingdom, let he that's greatest be servant of all. So you see this opposition here of these two kingdoms. And one of the things that we've really got to go back and look at is worship. And man, that's a word that has just really stuck with me. Worship. What does that have to do with politics? What does that have to do with anything? Well, all the way back, I mean, you go all the way back to the garden. There's worship there. Now, we don't see it. The words aren't used. The first time the word worship is used is when the three strangers, so to speak, show up to Abraham, and he kills the calf, the three visitors, and they worshiped. It doesn't use the word in our English translations, but it's there. And then we see it again when he is going to take Isaac on the hill on Mount Moriah, wasn't Mount Moriah at the time, and offer him up. Word worship. See, you will worship. It's just what or who are you worshiping? And idolatry is rampant. Idolatry is rampant. And when you don't worship God, Jesus, he talked about worship in spirit and in truth. And I know what's been done with those verses too. But when you don't worship God, like I said, you will worship something. It begins degradation of the human personality, of the human persona. He begins to, Paul would use the word perish. This degrading, because we were meant to be image bearers of God. And when you don't worship God, then that begins to degrade. And do we not see this in our society today? The church stands over here, and I'm afraid that in Western society, Western culture, we don't even know what worship is. And I'm putting myself in this category. I'm having to go back, because how did they worship? How did the Hebrews worship God? What was that structure? It's almost today like, well, we can't study the tabernacle. We can't study we're in the new covenant. If we study too much, we'll become Catholic or we'll become Jews. So we just sort of push it all off. And we have these tidbit sermons. We come up when we read a verse, and then we talk about that verse and how that verse applies to me and how I can make my life a little better in this world. And we miss the bigger picture of kingdom theology, of new creation theology. And we miss all of that. And I'm including myself into this. So not going away from the question of what role does the church have in politics, because I go back and I look, because I want to go to the beginnings, how Matthew does. He begins his genealogies here with Abraham. And look at Abraham. And Abraham, he's in the land of the Chaldeans, He has to leave the land of his father and go to a place he doesn't know where he's going. But he encounters Abimelech. It's Pharaoh. And he blows it, he blows it his first time around. And if we follow through Genesis, we will eventually come to one of the descendants of Abraham, Joseph. Now what happened to Joseph? Joseph is he's sold off by his brothers. He's goes down into Potiphar's house, but Potiphar was a man of wealth, a man to do. So he's in that house. And of course he's, the woman accuses him of rape. So he's thrown in jail, and he eventually ends up in Pharaoh's house. And, he becomes second in charge and saves, his people. You meant it for evil, God meant it for good. But he was sent there to speak truth. He was sent there to save that nation. Now I know we're talking to Egypt here. He was sent there to keep them from going into the famine, or when the famine hit, to rescue them, to show them how to do it. I go along and I look at Moses. What happened to Moses? Moses, again, is raised up in Pharaoh's house, and he has to come back. Let my people go so they can do what? So they can go worship because the worship was all messed up. Let us get back to the right worship. And because the worship was messed up, because everything was out of whack, now this same nation that they were once, Joseph and them once saved, now is going to perish. Now it's going to perish, and they drowned in the Red Sea. But my point is, Moses was there to speak truth to the principalities and powers. Okay, Paul would talk about we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and things in high places. And I know we get very spiritual off of that, which is understandable, not doing away with any of that. But they were there to speak truth to power. I look at David. Same thing with Saul. Saul was king. David is there. He's there to soothe him and play the harp, but he's there to speak truth, and the powers that be tried to kill him. He even goes down into the Philistine lands and talks to their kings. So we sit there to speak truth to power. What about Isaiah? They were to speak truth to powers, truth to the kings, whether it be the king of Judah, whether it be the king of Israel. They were there to speak truth. What about the other prophets? What about Jeremiah? They were there to speak truth into power. Elijah. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. Now what's happened, the church just goes over here and sits in the corner, does their thing, whatever it is they're doing. And the media is left to hold the principalities and powers in check. The media. Nothing, I'm not throwing any media under the bus here. But we know now that we've become to what? Not trust the media. So the media, they go out and, whoever pays for their networks and, get them online, everything is very skewed, and we have no one there to speak truth to power. Now, Jesus told his disciples, you'll stand before kings and rulers. Why would he do that? You're there to speak truth to power. Okay, you're there to speak truth to power. What about Jesus? Jesus stood before Pilate. And it was a clash of two kingdoms. My kingdom is not of this world. The only power you have came from my Father, he tells Pilate. And Pilate has the question, what is truth? Was there to speak truth to power. And then we roll around into the book of Acts, and here is Peter, and they're speaking. And what happens every time they did something, they're brought before the rulers, religious rulers, the Sanhedrin, whoever it was. They were brought before the rulers to speak truth and power. See, people today, they want to be apostles and bishops and fly around in jets and limos. And real apostles are brought before the kings, not to pat them on the shoulder and say, oh, I agree with you. We see that in scriptures. Is there not another prophet that will tell us the truth? They bring the old prophet up and said, you know what? You're going down today when you go into battle. So they're there to speak truth. I look, and when we get presidents and things of this nature, they bring in the people, who's ever got the biggest churches around, or the big, prosperity ministers in, and they pray over them and all this other stuff. I want you to understand this is not the way it is. This is speaking truth to power. What about Paul? Paul is brought, from the governor, he's brought to King Agrippa, and eventually even to Caesar, where he is beheaded. But he's there to speak truth. Why do you think it a strange thing, O king, that God would raise the dead? He's there to speak that truth. Now the church here today is to speak this truth to power. We've got nobody out, but I thank God that we get some of these media outlets, and we can get on YouTube and podcast and, throw it out there. Hopefully somebody hears. Speaking truth to power. That's what they did. They speak. And guys, I want to tell you something. That's part of being the royal priesthood. The royal priesthood. And the church is not living up to that. The Western church is not living up to that today. And for one reason, I will tell you, she's very, very, very immature, self-centered, immature. Because once you do, if you go back to the Old Testament, that gives us so many types and shadows. It's so cool. You could start training to be the priest. They would bring them in kind of like an apprenticeship at age 20 and then age 30. They had a 10-year apprenticeship of doing this duty of worship and offering the sacrifices and all these things. And once they did that, they took over the role at 30 years old, and only certain ones could do this. And we are called as the body of Christ to be this royal priesthood, but there's this apprenticeship, if you will. But then they dressed them in the royal apparel, okay, the priestly robes. And they went in that. And I know it's, we jump up and down and, hey, we put on the garments of Christ and we've, did all of this stuff. But I want to tell you what, they're there waiting. But the church in America, anyway, hasn't put them on yet, because once you do put them on, once you are clothed, and remember, these are put on by Aaron and Moses, and the other priests would dress them. And so when you do put these garments on, when you do put them on, I want you to understand, then it's going to be exactly what God spoke to Paul. I will show him what great things he must suffer for my name's sake. To fill up this suffering, okay? Because if you're a true apostle, and you've been dressed in this royal priesthood robe, acting apostle, you will suffer great things. And not, they took my jet, or they censored me, or whatever. No, you will suffer great things, because every one of these and you can go back and look throughout history and see what they did. What happened to the guy that translated the Bible into English? They burned him at the stake. I mean, when you, and you know what, our Western culture, the garments are there, the garments are ready, but she's not dressed. And what does Paul warn us in the New Testament? That we wouldn't be found naked. And that word brings with it the shame, because the shame of it is, you have all of this potential. The Holy Spirit has been given. You have all of this potential and you're not living up to this potential. What a shame. What a shame that we haven't taken this thing. We jump around and jump up and down all the mantles and all of this other just nonsense stuff. And not understanding what the church is to do. Yes, we feed the lambs, we feed the sheep, we visit the poor, heal the sick. All of those other things are included. But the vocation of the church is to be this royal priesthood. And the royal priesthood's number one thing was worship. Worship. And because of that worship, it brought you straight into conflict with the powers that be. That's where we are. So I hope that this video will find you, maybe stir you a little bit. We hope to kindle the fire a little bit, to light this fire. We gotta be about the Master's business here, speaking truth to power. Okay, guys, that's all I got. We'll talk about this stuff more later. The role of the church in politics. Guys, appreciate it very, very much for tuning in. Voice of Truth. Come see us on Rhythms of Grace, Sundays and Wednesdays. God bless you. See you soon. Hey guys, Jim here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I really love bringing these things to you. I just wanted to say, if you really liked it, drop a like. Man, that really helps us out a lot. Hit the share button, subscribe if you want to get notified when they're coming out. We come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as of right now. We got more teachings on Rhythms of Grace, communityfellowship.com. You can find us right there. On there, you'll find all the links to our podcast on Voice of Truth and Rhythms of Grace, Community Fellowship. And it'll also take you to our YouTube for these channels, Rhythms of Grace, communityfellowship.com. You can find everything right there. Again, thank you. Leave us a comment, hit subscribe. Guys, again, thank you so much for watching this. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. God bless.